I first met Vinson Watts about 1956 when I was a junior at Berea College, and he was the Associate Dean of Labor in the Labor Office. And I came to know him just a little bit that year, but I came to know him well in 1962 when I came back to work at Berea College myself, and he was still working in the same labor office. And what I quickly found out about him was that he was a very avid gardener, and he and I talked quite a bit about gardening projects. He was starting to work with the Wilson Evans Tomato at that time, and Wilson Evans was his boss in the labor office. Wilson was the Dean of Labor, and he had asked Vinson to take care of a tomato that he had been growing in his family for generations, and he wanted to experiment. Wilson, wanted to experiment some with the hybrid tomatoes that were coming out about that time. Well, Vinson started growing the Evans tomato in his yard and continued through 67, at which time he left and went to Morehead State University in Morehead, Kentucky. And he took the tomato and his interest in that tomato with him. And for a total of 52 summers, he only grew that tomato in his yard. He grew other tomatoes in other people's yards, but he just as a matter of comparison, but in his own garden, he grew only that tomato. Over the years, he and I kept up. We'd see each other at alumni meetings, and he would give me seeds of the tomato that he was working on. And I continued growing his tomato some as well. When we first started selling seeds, he suggested that I might be interested in selling his seed. He gave me permission to sell his seed, and I agreed even to give him a 10% commission on the seeds that I sold of his tomato. But it was just partly all sort of a gentleman's agreement. Then after he had a siege of Legionnaire's disease, he became a little bit unable to work and had to often carry an oxygen tank around with him, and he would stand on his front porch supervising some high school boys growing his tomato. As time went on, he continued getting a little bit sicker each year, and I started going to Morehead a little bit more often to see him. My wife and I went up to his 50th wedding anniversary and had a good meeting with him at that time. But it was evident that his days of growing his tomato was coming to an end. At the time, I saw him about 2 days before his death, and he was all tubed up, unable to talk, and but his mind was as quick as it ever was. He had a yellow pad in his hand, and he was write questions and then write answers. And I asked him when the Wilson Evans tomato became the Vinson Watts tomato, and he wrote on that pad 1980. A day or so later, I was notified of his death, and that was in the middle of March 2008, and I had plenty of the Vinson Watts tomatoes ready to plant in my high tunnel for that coming season. And so I picked out the largest Vinson Watts, the most beautiful tomato that I could find, put it in a large pot, and took it to the funeral home. And his two sons, his only children, arranged a round table in front of his Vincent's face there in the casket, and everybody who walked in knew exactly why that plant was there. And for most of them, it was more beautiful than any flowers that were there at the funeral home.